Hello everyone, and welcome to video 4 for the montante and greatsword classes that I'm doing. Today I want to introduce a different transition for cutting multiple cuts from above, so descending cuts, and this is one of the first things that we're doing that is based directly out of one of the manuals, specifically Alfieri. This is chapter 7, sort of introduction to using a greatsword. So this isn't sort of a situational rule as much as it is just a discussion of how to do it. I'd like to take a look at it and see what it tells us about biomechanics and how we can apply some of the things we've discussed into a situation that's more realistic and more flowing than some of the cuts we've been doing so far. So this comes in the starting position that is like a Schlüssel, if you're used to Meyer and the German phrasing. So we'll be bringing it in close to ourselves, bringing the cross guard clearly outside of the elbow, never inside, should always be outside. You're going to bring it relatively close. You're going to keep your wrists aligned underneath the sword, never above, always nice and triangulated underneath. If someone did hit the sword on the side, it would come down into the body. Okay. But also, we're not going to do this square, so you want to be facing the direction you want to be cutting. Your non-dominant foot forward, leaned back slightly, and then turn so your tip is pointing forward. Okay? And the basic movement here is to then use the rotation of the body to bring the sword around and gain momentum. You bring it around, step, and cut. Now, if we remember what we talked about in the Oberhaus section, it's that descending cuts should occur with straight arms. So even then, straight arms. But we're starting from a non-straight arm position. So what we will actually be doing is straightening within the motion. So we use the body to get us going, bring it around and bring it up. And once we've set ourselves up in this position, we finish that rotation with step and cut as we did before. Okay, so same setup as we had before. Schlüssel, body wound, body rotation gives us the energy to bring the sword up, step, cut. I'm not going to tell you to stop it with the body the same way we did before. Do it nice and slow, but because we're going to flow multiple cuts together, there is no stoppage point for that, so just bring it to a nice easy halt. Start with this nice and easy, nice and slow. That gives us the first cut. Now with a little bit more speed and actually using that body rotation for power. And then here. Using that body rotation, unwinding the core, and then just pushing the hands through is probably our best bet in getting that. We only have one image of this in Alfieri, and that's a person in this position, much further back. And for individual cuts, I think this is quite good, because it allows you to push it forward and cut around with the body, so you get a little bit extra power. But as I've mentioned in previous classes, the extra power is unnecessary. For the most part, what we're doing here, you really don't need a ton of extra power. The sword and gravity gives you what you need. So, one more time. If we can do it on the right hand side, and we can do it on the left. Here, we're just straight underneath the sword. Again, cross guard on the outside, but that doesn't matter quite as much, just because of the way your arms were going to be. They're open and under. Again, we're facing forward, non-cutting foot forward, and we're rotating into this position. And then we use the rotation and the step to cut. One more time. rotate, use the body rotation, straighten the arms, and cut. A little bit more speed. Now that one's a lot harder to stop, but the reality is we're not stopping. We'll be doing a transition between these two. So one more time, this side, throw the rotation. Now, if we do more than one of these, we can start to put them together. We start on this side, we cut, we bring it around, we cut, we bring it around. Now that bringing it around is kind of a rowing motion. So you get this good angle facing you. Here, bring it around, we straighten, we cut, and we bring that through. Right? Bring it here, and we row and pull, and then bring it up, almost like a short edge cut, into the other side. The thing that's important here is indexing the position of the blade with our hands. So, if we want to end here, and we have a firm grip on the sword, then it is using our palm facing us that we can control where the blade goes. So, again, we cut, and then while we bring it back with our right hand and let our left hand pull it through, we have our palm facing us. When we bring it through again into this position, we are safe and we're not getting the blade too close to our heads. So, straight, cut, push with straight arms, slide through. And that is using our palm. If our palm is facing the wrong direction, and we have it facing down, we'll come up flat, and we run the risk of A, interfering with ourselves with the cross guard, and also coming a little too close to our heads. So if we let the palm shift incorrectly, and if we let it shift too far back rather than flat with us, we run the risk of coming up towards our head. And so you really want your palm in the correct position in relationship to you, this way, but also in the correct facing so that our cross guard stays where it needs to be and our blade comes down in a safe way. One more time. Cut, row, through. There are many interpretations of this. My interpretation is always to bring it in nice and close. I find if it's a transitional kind of space that we're asking for here, because it's not a truly rule in sort of the narrow street or anything like that kind of situation that we see in other montante rules. It's just an introductory kind of setup. We will use that in later on situations and later on rules. And in those situations, for the most part, we don't just chain these together. We use this as a transitional space, which is why I prefer an interpretation of this that isn't about best, quick, front-loaded, very shoulder-heavy work at the front, which we see in some interpretations where this transition occurs high up in a way that I don't really like. So we start here and we cut down here and we do it all in front. I think that's not hugely useful, like I said, because of the context of the rule, but also I don't teach people necessarily who are very, very strong always, or are super athletic or anything. This is meant to be for everyone. And I think if we try to do it all up here, that tears up the shoulders real quick, and as a result, I don't find it particularly useful. So I like to bring it in to my chest. That gives us a stopping point if we want one. That allows us to use our biomechanics and our body to stop the cut in front of our chest, rather than trying to stop the cut at extension. It is a protective position in that we have sort of a pseudo guard at that point, and given the length of the weapon, if we were in combat with someone else, that'd be a guarded and safe position. It is a structurally sound place to end. If someone were to hit the front of the blade, the force would go through our arms and into our body, rather than if we're out front, it would just slam down. And finally, we can transition from that thing into any of the other rules that we'll see, both in Alfieri, where this can be led into a thrust or allowed to use as a transition to cut behind. But also we see this as a thrusting starting position in Godinho. And just generally I find it a useful place to be sort of couched on the inside. So, with a little bit more speed, let's try that again. Starter cut, straight arms, transition, straight arms, transition, straight arms. Right? So the aim at this point is to have a more comfortable and more realistic situation than the Oberhaus that we had practiced in one of the previous lessons, where we're just up and rotated and cut to here. That's all very valid and it stops everything and whatever. But particularly from the left, there is some danger here when we cut to where your elbow slams into the body. And that's not necessarily useful. So I find this is a good way to get our first sort of multi-cut pattern that's a little faster. A lot of the other ones with the high over the head things require a lot of effort. This is much more low effort, it's a lot simpler. But it's important to have our biomechanics of the cut down first so that we can apply those straight arm mechanics and the straight arm transition in this when we are breaking the other rules of not always keeping our arms straight but really bringing it in and closing off our elbows. Time. Around, straight, cut, transition with the index, straight, transition with the index. If you come back on individual cuts, you'll slow the momentum rather than allowing it to be forward moving. But if you stop here, we can transition into other things like thrusting, but also allowing us to change sides and cut that way. So, things to remember for this, which we will build into a few other things. On the cut, get to straight arms before bringing down the cut. Bring it in nice and close. This also helps the momentum from pulling the sword away from you. Stay tight and be very aware of what you're doing, and index with your palms on the side where you're open, palm facing you. On the side where you're crossed, palm facing out. So that when you bring it around on the transition, you're clean and you're threatening and you're not likely to hurt yourself. I'd also like to shout out James Clark, with whom I first studied these things, even if my interpretation at this point is slightly different from the one he has in his videos. But also Matlock Hargrove, with whom I've been having a lot of good discussions about this, and I look forward to more. Thank you.